Good morning. Can you hear me well?
Yes,
Good
we do.
morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the strategic approaches to adaptation reporting under the ETF webinar. My name is Juyeon Kang, the research specialist at the KI, Korea Adaptation Center for Climate Change. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much. So to begin the webinar, let's have the opening remarks from the Mr. Kim Ji-soo, the Director General of the Ministry of Environment, Republic of Korea. Mr. Kim, please.
Good afternoon. I am Ji-soo Kim, the Director of the Climate Change Climate Adaptation Division at the Ministry of Environment, Republic of Korea. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this webinar. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to our partner, Tukpa Ikmeli at UNFCCC, who organized this webinar. Given that all countries are required to submit biannual transparency report by the end of 2024, we hope you will take this opportunity to deepen your understanding of adaptation reporting. Today's program will offer you a deep understanding of the enhanced transparency framework of the Paris Agreement, ensure experiences and lessons learned from previous adaptation reports. Korea has been making great efforts in climate change adaptation, establishing our first National Climate Change Adaptation Plan in 2010, and currently implementing the third adaptation plan. Korea has a comprehensive adaptation framework in place covering scientific assessment and monitoring evaluations. Last March, Korea submitted its first adaptation communication, which include detailed information on Korea's adaptation policies and practices. Today, I hope that Korea's experience provides you with insights for your adaptation reporting. Everyone here, your presence shows your commitment to addressing climate change. Let's use this opportunity to learn, collaborate, and inspire each other for a greener and more resilient future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Thank you, Mr. Kim. Now let's welcome Ms. Tukpa Ikmeli, the team lead of the CGE ETF support unit at UNFCCC for her welcoming remarks.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Ms. Kang, for the introductions. And I also would like to thank Director General Kim Ji-soo. I hope I'm pronouncing your names correctly. So thank you. And I also would like to warmly welcome, like on behalf of all of us, all the organizers as well, all the participants who joined us to this webinar. So I think I also would like to highlight a few points, especially for the CAST program, because this Adaptation Academy is under an umbrella program of the UNFCCC's initiatives, which actually where we are kind of trying to get in touch and collaborate with very unique and valuable partners around the world. And in that context, I believe this Adaptation Academy, we are very lucky to have this collaboration with the Korean Environmental Institute, as well as under of course, the Center on Adaptation, Korea Adaptation Center for Climate Change. And from what I was hearing from Mr. Kim, that Korea also has a very comprehensive experience, as well as on adaptation assessment, as well as practices. And I think it will also be very valuable when this information, this experience is also shared with other countries and other like trainees that will be hopefully joining this in-person training next year as well. So with that, actually, I also wanted to highlight a few points, because this webinar is, of course, we can see this as a first step for the Adaptation Academy, because I was just explaining, like, we have this CAST program and we have three programs under this CAST initiative. One is this Adaptation Academy, another one is the ETF blended course, and there is another one on GHG inventories. So we are trying to offer a variety of a full spectrum of training activities to the climate practitioners and experts, especially focusing on early to mid-career professionals from developing countries. Because we know there is not enough sometimes activities on the ground. So that's why we are very happy with collaborating these our partners, in this case the Korean Environmental Institute, because we sometimes are also having challenges to be able to address all the needs of the developing countries. So again, I would like to thank you, the Korean government as well, for helping us. And and when we come to the Adaptation Academy, actually, we started to offer the Adaptation Academy in 2021. But, you know, we had this COVID pandemic then, so it could only happen in a virtual format in 2021. But then next year in 2022, we had managed to organize an in-person training in Netherlands, in Delft. And this, in our opinion, this allowed much greater interaction, one-to-one interaction on the ground among practitioners, participants, and lecturers, of course. And one thing to consider was we received like more than 600 applications by then. But of course, we could only accommodate like a few more than 100 trainees. But that also showed us the great interest, and that's why we are trying to offer this training program again on adaptation to all interested trainees, together with our partners, especially with KE. And because we know actually the interest into adaptation reporting, adaptation assessment, vulnerability and adaptation assessment, it is a very important topic for all developing countries. And now it is also picking speed, especially based on the latest outcomes and from the negotiations as well. So with that, actually, maybe I will just stop here because I know we will have some additional presentations and some further information to explain the transparency arrangements, some adaptation related information. Nevertheless, I will just wish you all a very fruitful discussion, a very fruitful webinar. And I really encourage all participants to ask as many questions as you have in mind. There is never a simple question. Just ask any questions you have so we can just understand each other better in the best way. And also, please stay in this webinar till the end, because I believe at the end we will also there will be also lots of clarification and information on how to apply for the in-person adaptation training that will be happening next year. So with that, I would like to thank again Mr. Kim and also Mrs. Kang, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's get into our main discussion. So to begin our seminar, Mr. Tibor Lindowski, the Program Officer of the CGE and the ETF Support Unit at UNFCCC, will introduce us the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement and the Enhanced Transparency Framework. Tibor, please.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone, and thanks to all participants who are joining us from different parts of the world. So let me share my screen now, and please let me know if you can see it. And I believe now everyone should be able to see the presentation. So let me just briefly give you an overview of the current monitoring, reporting, and verification, the MRV system under the convention, and the transparency and ETF under the Paris Agreement. Firstly, let me just briefly touch on the current MRV system, which is now ongoing, and this slide is just supposed to show you that there are two different streams. Currently, one is for the developed countries and the other one is for developing countries. For the purpose of this workshop, I would focus on the right hand side, where you can see the developing countries, and the process is called International Consultation and Analysis, so to say ICA process, and it includes 3 stages. The first one is, as you can see, the reporting. So currently developing countries are reporting information through their BURs, as well as the NCs, so biennial update reports and the national communications. The second stage is the technical analysis, which relates to the biennial update reports. But what we can see recently in the last years is that more and more developing countries are actually also submitting the RED Plus technical annex to the BURs, as well as the national inventory reports as additional information to their BURs, which is great because it just shows that developing countries are really interested in having the technical analysis of the information that they are able to collect, and are taking the technical analysis as a benefit, because that's what it is, actually looking at the information that you are supposed, or you are providing and submitting under the convention, and the team of technical experts can provide an analysis of this information and identify the capacity building gaps and needs of the country, which then can be taken forward and addressed. And the last stage is the facilitative sharing of views, the FSV process, which is in a format of a workshop under the subsidiary body for implementation, the SBI, And this last kind of stage of this process is supposed to, or it gives an opportunity for the developing country to present the findings and the information they were able to submit, and give also the opportunity to other countries to ask questions. So through these workshops and interaction, the country is supposed to is offered an opportunity to actually have a nice exchange and very useful exchange with the other countries, and to find out, you know, what are the really needs, the gaps, and how to address them in this regard. So this is the concept of the international consultation and analysis, which is currently under the convention. But when we go further under the Paris Agreement, we have the transparency regime now, or not, which is currently being implemented. And the Paris Agreement established the enhanced transparency framework for action and support. So it has two components. One is the transparency of action, which provides a clear understanding of the climate change actions, especially when it comes to the achieving of the NDCs and the adaptation actions, including the good practices, the priorities, needs, and gaps to inform the global stocktake. And on the other side, the transparency of support. The objective is to provide a clarity on support provided and received by relevant individual parties in the context of the climate change actions. And also it, to the extent possible, is supposed to provide an overview of the aggregated financial support provided to inform the global stocktake as well. So these are the important elements of the enhanced transparency framework. Secondly, as I believe you might have already heard, the whole concept of the enhanced transparency framework is that it's building up on already existing MRV systems. So countries who already have the MRV systems in place don't have to start from the scratch, but there is already some work that has been done, and the enhanced transparency framework is building up on this. As you can see here on this slide, there are again the three stages. The first one is the reporting. So the enhanced transparency framework is streamlining these processes, and there will be one process for all parties and all countries. So for example, in case of reporting, unlike as it was under the convention, there's biennial update reports and the biennial reports. There will be only one biennial transparency reports for all the countries to be submitted. Secondly, the technical analysis and the review of the BRs now will just be one streamlined process, which is called technical expert review. And lastly, there will be the facilitative multilateral consideration of progress, which is the FMCP. So under the ETF, as we call the Enhanced Transparency Framework, and the Paris Agreement, all countries will be having one single streamlined process. There are a few elements also to mention in this regard, which are the key kind of elements and enhancements compared to the reporting under the MRV system. First of all, that there is a common modalities, procedures, and guidelines, the MPGs as we call them, which are applicable to all parties. As we know, not all parties and countries are on the same level of reporting processes, and therefore it's been agreed that there is a flexibility to those developing countries that need it in the light of their capacities. So this is a very important part of the enhanced transparency framework. However, at the same time, parties also need to the extent possible, identify and regularly update and report the areas of improvement. So even though parties can use the flexibility when reporting and providing the information, there should be a continuous improvement in the reporting. So nobody starts reporting in a perfect way. So nobody will have a perfect first biennial transparency report. However, the important element is the improvement over time. So each country should actually improve their reporting. There is also the element of the provisions which are in the modalities, procedures, and guidelines, which are mostly mandatory. So most of the elements that are included in the MPGs are also shall requirement, which means that parties and developing countries, or all the countries actually, shall be reporting on these elements, but I will come back to this in my presentation a bit later. And lastly, there is also an establishment of the compliance committee, which is a mechanism to facilitate the implementation and to promote the compliance, especially in the context of the NDCs, the technical expert review, the reporting, and the process as such under the Paris Agreement in relation to Article 15. So that's also one of the new key enhancements of the enhanced transparency framework. In this slide, I would just wanted to point out what I've just mentioned, that there is a different of the provisions which was under the convention, which were mainly voluntary and which are now under the Paris Agreement. And as you can see, when it in the context of reporting, on the left-hand side, all parties shall report the information on the national greenhouse gases, firstly, and secondly, the progress made in implementing and achieving the nationally determined contribution, so the NDCs. The second element and the second rectangle that you can see below relates to the climate change impact and adaptation, whereas this is not a shall requirement. That means that all parties should report the information on impact and adaptation. However, this is not the shall requirement, so it's not mandatory for all the parties. On the right-hand side, you can see then that there are some provisions that are not related to all parties, but only for developed country parties that shall also provide information on the support provided and mobilized, while developing country parties should provide information on support needed and received. So this is not, again, a shall requirement, but it is a should requirement, which means that it's not mandatory. But I believe that it's very useful and it's beneficial for all developing countries to report such information on financial technology support and capacity building support needed and received. Then the second stage of the process is the technical expert review, whereas all parties shall undergo technical expert review of information that will be submitted in their biennial transparency reports under the enhanced transparency framework. While when it comes to the support provided, the developed countries that will provide this information will also undergo the technical expert review. However, for other parties that provide financial technology capacity building support to other developing countries, they may undergo the technical expert review. So it's on their, basically it's voluntary, it's just on their interest basically to undergo this expert review of the information they provide. And last but not least, the facilitative multilateral consideration of progress, which is quite a mouthful process. And this also will apply to all countries and all parties. So developed and developing country parties, all of them will be part of the facilitative multilateral consideration of progress when it comes to the efforts undertaken under Article 9 and the respective implementation and achievement of its NDCs. Here, I would just like to point out that this is the comparison of the, as we call, thematic areas, which are covered in different reports. So on the left-hand side, you can see the biennial update reports, in the middle, national communications, and on the right-hand side, the biennial transparency reports. While if you look at the thematic areas, you can see that the biennial transparency reports includes firstly the national greenhouse gas inventory, which is mandatory to report for all parties. Secondly, the progress made in implementing and achieving the NDCs, which is also mandatory. And thirdly, the climate change impact and adaptation, which is a should requirement. So it's not mandatory, but it's should requirement for all countries. And last but not least, the financial technology transfer and capacity building support needed and received, which is also not mandatory, but parties are very much encouraged to actually use this opportunity and report on this information as well. And in addition to these thematic areas, as I mentioned already, there are two elements. One is the possibility of using the flexibility when reporting. And the second very important element and enhancement is the areas of improvement. So countries, if they use the flexibility, also shall identify the areas of improvements and try to address these in the next cycle of the reporting process. These are just to basically repeat some of the fundamental enhancements and elements. First of all, it's important to know that the Enhanced Transparency Framework builds on the current MRV system and tries to enhance this system in order to help all the countries and especially the developing country parties to be able to collect more comprehensively the information and establish a robust institutional arrangements in their countries. Secondly, it also recognizes the different starting points of the developing country parties, especially. That means that it's clear that not all the first biennial transparency reports from all the developing countries will be perfect. There are different circumstances, and there are countries that, of course, are more vulnerable to the climate change impact, and all of this is recognized in the Enhanced Transparency Framework. The flexibility, I think I've already mentioned, the continuous improvement as well, and last but not least, the support is also a fundamental part of the Enhanced Transparency Framework, and it is recognized that there is a need for support for developing countries. And of course, the reporting on support needed and received in the biennial transparency reports is very much and kind of important part of the whole Enhanced Transparency Framework, and it can help developing countries to somehow communicate their needs and also the support that they have received. So as mentioned, this is just a kind of an infographics to showcase how countries will start reporting in 2024 on their first biennial transparency reports and the different starting points. As you can see, the dots on the left side with a one common goal, basically to get to the parties operating under the same standards, hopefully not that far away from 2024. And of course, there is an expectation of using the flexibility when starting to report, but at the end improving over the time and get to the one common goal, which is that all parties will be able to report on a very comprehensive and under the same standards. And this is, I think, one of my last slides, which showcase that as I mentioned, the 2024 is actually the milestone. So this year we are already finishing the 2023, and as it was already mentioned by Mr. Kim, I believe, and Tugba, that there are under the current MRV system, the last biennial update reports by the developing countries should or shall be reported not later than 31st December 2024, and the first biennial transparency reports shall be submitted no later than 31st December 2024, which means that the last BURs and the first BTRs, the deadline for them is the 31st December next year. there is a special circumstances of the SITs and the LDCs which have a discretion when reporting this and submitting this information. On the other hand, I mentioned already the national communications, which you can see at the very bottom when developing country parties actually will continue reporting on national communications, because this is happening under the convention, while the reporting on the BNI transparency reports is being submitted and it's being processed under the Paris Agreement. So these are the two differences. And last but not least, I would like to highlight the fact that when we talk about enhanced transparency framework and submitting the BNI transparency reports and the whole process of transparency, it's not about reporting only, but it has a lot of other advantages and of course other benefits, national but also international. For example, I will not go through all of them, but if you look at one or two national benefits, access to support can be improved, which means that I have already mentioned that reporting on support needs in the BNI transparency report can really help developing countries to better articulate and communicate their needs to the developed countries, to the other donors, which they can use it as basically which a basic or which a basis for further kind of communication and reaching out to donors, better communicating with them, and then getting more and more support through these donors. Or then, of course, the capacity building, which is one essential component of the whole process of enhancing the reporting and the submitting the BNI transparency reports. Well, with every single step on the way, since starting the collecting the data and the information, then communicating with other institutions in the country, and together bring together all the stakeholders. This will also at the end help to build capacities in the country and help to kind of get the better technical knowledge, which will essentially help to submit a better BNI transparency reports. And of course, on the other hand, internationally, we can just mention the trust building among the stakeholders, not only in the governmental but non-governmental organization practitioners, everyone around, which is why we also promote this Adaptation Academy as very unique and a great opportunity for different stakeholders to be involved, to come together and to exchange their experiences. So I think with that, I will leave it here. Thank you very much for your attention, and looking forward to any questions you might have. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Thibault, for your comprehensive overview. So now let's invite Mr. David Oman, the Associate Program Officer of the Reporting and Engagement Unit at UNFCCC. He will share with us the lesson learned and insights on the adaptation reporting of the UNFCCC. David, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and also welcome from my side. Let me just draw up the slides. Okay. You should now see my slides. I assume everybody can see it. Otherwise, please stop me. Also, first of all, thank you for the invitation and welcome to all the participants. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. First of all, I would like to show you a little bit about the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement arrangements for adaptation, so that you have an overview of what's happening. You will see that this is kind of a continuum that starts with a sign and research portion and ends in the reporting one. We do have specific adaptation reporting tools, which are the adaptation communications, and we'll come back to that later. And of course, there's very specific adaptation requirement in the biennial transparency report. In terms of the evolution of adaptation information arrangement under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, we do have several tools in which and channels in which adaptation is communicated, both under the Paris Agreement as well as the convention, and you can see that reflected here. So we do have the national communications of Annex 1 parties, which is going on since 1999 with new guidance 2019, which includes an adaptation component. We have since 2002 the national communications of non-Annex 1 parties, which also has this adaptation or can have this adaptation component. In the Paris Agreement, we do have the ADCOMs, which are the adaptation communications, which are specific reporting, which is a specific reporting requirement or for adaptation, and that's something that has been there since 2015, 2018, when it came into with the Capital rule book got into effect, and the same with the BTRs. All of these have adaptation specific guidelines. We do have another process that are the national level adaptation processes with reporting and communication aspects. So, for example, the NAPAs and the NAPs. The NAPs are plans for adaptation, are basically like a tool for adaptation planning and implementation. So it goes a little bit beyond the communication and reporting aspects as per se, but it definitely has some of these aspects included. We do have some other information channels that are serving as where you can find adaptation information, which is the adaptation components of INDCs and NDCs. So 2014 INDCs, and since then the progressive updates under the NDCs, and you can find some information related to adaptation there. And the low emission development strategies, the LTLEDs, which also have this adaptation component or can have. So this is a very comprehensive table, and I will not go through all of this. So this is something that you can probably look at when the presentation is sent around afterwards. But this is just a little compilation of adaptation information. What are the guidelines and what is the status of submission? So you can see that here again we have put together all the different tools in which you can find adaptation information. And I mean, Tibor already talked about BTRs, so I will not go into detail there. And NDCs. So I will just probably take the opportunity to talk a little bit more also about the ADCOMs here, because they're adaptation specific, and the NAPs. Apologies. So the ADCOMs were actually put into place to enhance the visibility and the profile and to balance it with mitigation, and aim with strengthening action and support and service and input also to the GST. It was also a help to review the progress towards the global goal in adaptation, which is something that I'll also talk about later because there have been major advancements at this COP specifically. So in terms of what an ADCOM is, I think there was like a lengthy discussion and negotiations around this item, because as you can see, there are a lot of adaptation information already out there. And the idea is always to be mindful of the country's capacities, especially those of LDCs, SIDS, but also in general developing countries about additional reporting burdens. So it is something that can be a standalone document, but it can also be something like information that is submitted in another document. So when we think, for example, of the BTRs, the national communications, the NAPs, the NDCs, so all of this can serve as a vehicle, that's how it's called in the decision, for an adaptation communication. And the way it works is that countries indicate in the adaptation communications registry what their adaptation communication component is, or what their adaptation communication is. So it can be that they say, so this part of my NDC is my adaptation communication, or this part of my national communication is my adaptation communication. Actually, it happens quite a bit, and I'll come to that later again, like for some stats. There are also, of course, the standalone adaptation communication, which some countries, or like a significant amount of countries, have opted for. So that is all contained in one information. The types of information you can find in the different arrangements, I'll not go through all of them, but you can see that similar to the BTR or the reporting under the ETF, I mean, we are talking about similar reports here. So the information that Tibor and I gave are overlapping from different perspectives, is that you have different information contained in the different instruments. So for example, you will see that you find loss and damage included in BTRs, but not necessarily in the ADCOM or the national communications or the NAPs. It's just an example. And this is basically what basically is currently in the themes, but you will see that with the GGA framework I put into place, also the information that is here captured in here can have or may have expanded substantively. Again, this is something that you can, just an example of where potential synergies now between national adaptation plans and BTRs could be. So there is a very detailed stepwise process to formulate and implement NAPs. And all of them basically can relate to one or the other part of the decision 18 CMA1, in which is basically also lined out what are the information contained in the BTRs. So you can see that the stepwise approach is the initiating and launching the NAP process, which mostly relates to elements A, B, C of the BTRs, the preparatory elements, and so on. So you can see that there is some kind of a connection, or how we call it, probably synergies between these two instruments. Now you will see that, and we don't have a nice infographic for this now because it was only adopted last week, that we do have the GGA framework now in place. So you will remember that we had a 2-year work program, the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work program on the global goal and adaptation. It ended, it was concluded at the scope. It had 8 workshops, and it tried to basically it aimed to give the North Star for adaptation, because you will see, or you will have noticed that for mitigation, we have clear temperature goal, and we have a clear, like, measurable path there. Whereas for adaptation, the global goal was always defined in the Paris Agreement, was always pretty, like, general, and it was difficult because we all know that adaptation is much more context specific than mitigation. So at this COP, we did have the parties adopted, or the CMA adopted the UAE framework for global climate resilience, and that also includes thematic targets, like one, I don't know if it's called overarching targets, but one landing zone of enhancing adaptive capacity and raising resilience in many aspects. And then we have thematic targets and what we call dimensional targets. So thematic targets are, for example, along the lines of reducing climate-induced water scarcity. It's about food and agricultural production. It's about health impacts, ecosystem and biodiversity impacts, and it lines out some kind of targets where countries may want to land. So the way it's done in terms of the combination with the existing reporting documents is that CMF5 invited parties to voluntarily include in the adaptation communications, BTRs, NEPs, national communications, and NDCs quantitative and or qualitative information related to the targets and the cross-cutting considerations. And it also invited parties to report on progress, good practices, experiences, and lessons learned in relation to implementing the framework in their communication and reporting. So I think this is something that will need to be taken into account from now on. It's still very early because, as said, it was adopted last week as part of the UAE consensus. And yeah, there will be, of course, more to come and analysis of what this means for the different reporting documents. So in terms of what this means for, in terms of some more stats for the, am I here? Stats. So we have, you will see that about like half of the adaptation communications, we have 61, is like standalone, but a significant portion are also like the reported as part of NDCs, NAPs, and national communication. And the information that is normally included in adaptation communications is the adaptation framework, the progress in adaptation actions, the support needs, the contribution of adaptation action to regional international frameworks, and gender responsiveness and indigenous traditional knowledge, which is part also of the cross-cutting considerations now in the GGA framework. Adaptation components in the NDCs, we have 81% of them with an adaptation component and 19% without. So you will see that this is being used already actively as a very significant tool for reporting on adaptation at the moment. And on the right side, you can find like some information that is included there, which is of course, most dominantly the adaptation strategies, policies, and plan, sector adaptation measures, adaptation relevant research, climate risks and vulnerabilities, and the M&E of adaptation. Now to the NEPs and LT-LEDs. We do have 51 NEPs, and they're serving as a vehicle they're basically plans for implementation to planning vehicles for planning and implementation of adaptation. So in terms of the relation to other to the other documents, for example, the NDCs here, they're serving as a vehicle for operationalizing the NDC component, for example, in the Fiji, Pakistan, and Timor-Leste NDC. They provide input for the future NDC update in the case, for example, for Bangladesh. And they serve as an ADCOM to communicate adaptation progress in the case of Bhutan, Nepal, and Timor-Leste. In terms of the LT-LEDs, 66 or 97% of all LT-LEDs have an adaptation information or component. The information included there are the priority adaptation measures by 2030-2050, and typically in alignment with the NDCs. nature-based solutions, transformational adaptation part, just transition. Again, the adaptation and resilience policies and strategies, climate risk and impact. So you see those two are very similar between NDCs and LT-LADs, and the synergies between adaptation and mitigation. So thank you for the attention. If there are any questions, I think I've been informed that after the next presentation, we have some Q&A. And I wish you, I want to give back the floor to June. And thanks a lot for the attention.
Thank you very much, David. Actually, our colleagues from UNFCCC must be very tired after COP28. So once again, thank you very much for your participation. So to provide a practical perspective to our discussion, please allow me to share the Korea's experience on the first adaptation communication with you. So let me share the presentation slide. Just a moment. Okay. Can you, I hope that you can see me, you can see my presentation slide. So it's a country case, the Korea's experience on the first adaptation communication. So two gentlemen before me gave us a very good background about the adaptation reporting vehicles and the background. And let me begin with the overview of our first adaptation communication project. Actually, we did some research first, and then we collect the data and we draft the adaptation communication and also gather the opinion and get the approval by the commission, and we submitted it. So let me share my experience by the timeline. This is the sort of outcome our research on the adaptation related reporting vehicle. I would like to touch upon the outcome on this research outcome. This research outcome, because I think it might be helpful to you too. So as David mentioned, that there are many adaptation related reporting vehicles around us. But in my case, from my personal perspective, I consider these 4 reporting vehicle in Korea, because in Korea, we already had a NAB, so we couldn't really use a NAB as reporting vehicle. So we did our research on these 4 vehicles. So NDC, BTR, and ADCOM and NC. So this is the reporting schedule what we had. So as you can see, the ADCOM, the first ADCOM is supposed to submit sometime end of last year or the only this year. And then we had the due to, we had also scheduled to NC5 this year, but our timeline didn't match each other because NC5 was supposed to be completed by the end of this year. And then ADCOM should be submitted to only this year, so that to be input of the GST. So we decide to have the standalone document for the ADCOM. So we start the research on that. So in order to conduct the research, I had two questions on our research. And my first question was, what is the distinctiveness among the adaptation-related reporting vehicles on the Paris Agreement? As you have already heard from the David, that there are many common elements in different adaptation reporting vehicles. And then what are the differences among them? That was my first question. So we went through the each reporting vehicle, like NDC, as David already mentioned, it's binding. It could also include adaptation element, and it could be the vehicle of the adaptation communication. And then I personally thought that this might be has the characteristic of the ex ante And for the BTR, it's a biannual transparency report. We have to submit it in every 2 years starting from next year. It's binding also, but the adaptation component is not that binding. It could be also vehicle of the outcome. And the NC, of course, we have NC, and then it could be the vehicle of the outcome, but I mean, for the non-X1 country, it's not binding, but we are submitting periodically. Okay. And then, so this is my lesson learned. It's like my personal conclusion on this one. So NDC must be ex-ante. NDC has a characteristic of the ex-ante. So it should include the information on the adaptation plans, like what we're gonna do in the future. But for the BTR and ADCOM, it could have many information which has a ex-post characteristic. But my real question was, what is the difference between the BTR and ADCOM? We all know that the BTR is reporting in every 2 years, and ADCOM we might be reporting in every 5 years. And then how can we differentiate the information which is included in both report? So my personal conclusion is that for the BTR, I will focus on the progress in adaptation actions in past 2 years. But for the outcome, we will try to incorporate the full details of the adaptation actions in past 5 years. So it's my personal outcome. And I also came with the second question. So what are the key elements among the adaptation related reporting vehicles? Because as we all mentioned that the adaptation reports has common elements already, and then we have to report the adaptation action in all different adaptation reports in every 1 or 2 years each time. I mean, if we decide to report NC and NDC, BTR and ADCOM, I tried to calculate it, and then I found out that we have to report anything about adaptation element in every 1 or 2 years from next year. So we tried to find out the key element among those adaptation reporting vehicles so that we can have sort of sustainable system to produce this kind of adaptation information. So we looked through the guideline for each reporting documents. So for NDC, in terms of the adaptation part, there is no guideline existed. And then for the ADCOM, we have a guideline with all these elements, but it's for the voluntary use. And for the BTR, yes, we have a similar guideline, but for the voluntary use. And we have NC. So we have, excuse me. So we have the guideline for the Annex 1 country, we have a binding guidelines, but for non-Annex 1 country, we have a sort of similar type of information guideline for the voluntary use. So my personal conclusion, second personal conclusion, the lesson learned so far is this table. Excuse me. So NDC, we will report the adaptation policy setting like impact and risk, vulnerabilities, and implementation and monitor. So we will have a different reporting perspective for the NDC. But for the ADCOM and BTR and NC, we probably have similar adaptation element inside. Sorry. So the orange color indicate that these are the, excuse me, it's very cold in Korea. It's -13 degrees this morning. Okay, so the darker color is more important because these are the elements for the multiple reports. So the adaptation policy setting and impact, risk, vulnerability information, and then right. So these are the most important elements we think. So this is the outcome. And then let me move on to the practical process we went through for our adaptation communication. So actually we collect the data. For the data collection, we had as two steps. So first one is a desk review, and another step is information gathering from the relevant ministries. Oh, sorry, the diagram doesn't look good. But this is the comprehensive framework of our third national adaptation plan. So the reason why I brought up this diagram is that actually Korea, we have the national adaptation plan starting from the scientific assessment, and we also have monitoring evaluation system as well. So inside our NAB, we already have a full adaptation policy cycle included. So we have sort of a very comprehensive framework of the adaptation plan. So thanks to national adaptation plan, most of the important element was we could get from the national adaptation plan. So for the adaptation policy setting and the impact, risk, and vulnerabilities, and the information about the implementation and monitoring evaluation, all this information was I could gather from the national adaptation plan. So I think I wanted to share this experience with you. I mean, some country doesn't have a national adaptation plan yet, but some might have adaptation lab. So it is important to have a system to draw this kind of information out of the lab might be very important because we have to report adaptation related reporting in every 1 or 2 years from now on. So it's important to have a sustainable source of information. And then we start drafting. So sorry, so it's written in all Korean, but we start with the bullet points for the drafting. So we start with the bullet point and then we share it with the others and then get the comment, and then we draft the full sentence based on this bullet point. And once we finalize the full text, we start gathering the opinion from the ministries and they get the approval. So for the opinion, we share our full draft in Korean and English with the relevant ministry, and they get the opinion from them. So, and then for the approval, we have a presidential commission on the carbon neutrality and green growth. We need to get the approval by them, so we got the approval. So it's kind of example that we get the opinion from various stakeholders. So the first column means that the name of the people who gave us the opinion and the page. And then there are the sentences to be amended. So, and we decide whether we will incorporate their feedback or not. If not, we give full detail why we cannot incorporate their opinion. So last one is a submission. So let me share our final outcome of Republic of Korea's the first adaptation communication. So this is the cover we submitted to the UNFCCC last March. So actually, the cover illustration is like consists of the winning entry of the climate change adaptation illustration competition. We had 17 award-winning entries out of 535 submissions, and we make a design with these winning entries. And then lots of people love this cover of the adaptation communication. Our adaptation communication has several characteristics. So first one is that we chose to submit as a standalone document. And then our reporting period is 5 years, so past 5 years, so starting from the 2018 to 2022. And it contains the forward and the Korean context, and then climate impact risk, and adaptation governance, and NAV, and the international cooperation and on adaptation. Our special feature about our adaptation communication is that we try to emphasize on the excellence. I mean, what we have done well, and then good cases, and then lesson learned. And we try to enhance our readability so that we include lots of pictures and the figures and boxes for the easy access. And then for the fidelity, so we try to report as much as information possible. I mean, as much as we could get from the field, we try to as much as possible. So these are the pages. So you can see lots of diagrams, boxes, and the pictures, so that you can easily read. So this is my final slide. So for the first outcome, these are the information we could include. Because earlier I mentioned that first 4 important elements, we could get those elements from the NAP process. So it was easy to get it. But the other elements like support and cooperation, or the experience sharing, or some other information like adaptation actions and economic diversification plan, or like gender responsive adaptation action. These type of information, we tried to get it from the ministry, but we couldn't get it. So we couldn't include in our first outcome. But since based on our first outcome experience, we know that what kinds of information we could have from the existing system, and then what kinds of information we need to, we don't have. So when we revise our NAV, we try to include the information which is not available now. We try to include sort of sustainable information gathering system in our next NAV when we revise the next one. So thank you very much. This is all for my presentation. Thank you. So now we invite you to participate in our Q&A session. So if you have any question, please raise your hand and turn on your camera, or leave your question in the chat box. When you posing a question, please identify yourself and indicate to whom your question is addressed. Okay, sorry if I don't pronounce your name properly, but Quasi Baby, you can ask your
Yes,
question.
this is Kazi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I'm very pleased to hear your nice presentation. All presenters are very, very effective. And my question is, at the beginning, you mentioned about the Adaptation Academy. So how we can involve with this Adaptation Academy, this institution? Because it is very interesting. And I also wanted to know about the national and international matter, under the national political policy planning, access to support, improved capacity building, awareness. So these are, you will provide this support, or this is just the necessary items in the academy, adaptation academy. So, and also my question is how to adaptation, implementation, and reporting. So when it would be needed? Are you going to do partnership with the participants, or because we are interested to make partnership? So thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me start with the academic side. So actually, before we close, I would like to, I was about to share the in-person training opportunity for next year, but let me share that with you. So UNFCCC, KI, KCCC, along with the collaborating partners and the support from the Ministry of Environment, the Republic of Korea, will host the Asia UNFCCC CAS Adaptation Academy next year. It will be a 1 week course tentatively held in late April 2024 in Thailand. And then selected participants will be just a moment, please. If your microphone is on, please off. Okay, good. Most important information. So the it's a 1 week course tentatively held in the late April 2024 in Thailand. So selected participants will be sponsored for their travel and expenses. So registration will open only next year, and we will circulate the registration information to the today's participant by email. So we will circulate this information only next year, in January. So please check your email mailbox next year, then you can get more information about the registration. So you also had the second question about the implementation reporting. So your question is addressed to whom? Maybe in the meantime, I can share my own experience. So we in the Korea's adaptation communication, we have a sort of component of implementation. Thanks to our national adaptation plan, so each ministry have to report their implementation. They have to report their adaptation action each year. They need to report their outcome of implementation each year to the Ministry of Environment. So we already have that information in our NAP process. And then for the local government, it's also same. For the regional, provincial, local government, they also have to report their implementation outcome to the Ministry of Environment by each year. So we have this kind of implementation report available to us. So we selected some of the good cases from this implementation report, and then we included in our adaptation communication. So this is the Korea's case. but it might be different for each country's environment and cases. So hope that there might be many partnership available to support your country's implementation. Thank you.
Yeah, I am from Bangladesh. I'm from Bangladesh. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Is there any other question? Or okay.
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, this is Dr. Mehraj from Sher Kashmir University of Agriculture Science and Technology, Sukost, Kashmir.
Okay.
Ma'am, regarding I have done almost the plantation of almost 10 hectares. But I want to get the funds, or I have rehabilitated almost 10 hectares of land. I want to get some finance so that I can continue this work for the degraded areas. For rehabilitation, I have planted conifers like deodar, cupress, and many other species to rehabilitate the degraded areas in the area.
Okay, thank you very much for your suggestion. So actually we don't really have a support program for the individual project. But thank you for sharing your project. So if I can come up with some other good opportunity, then I will be sharing it with you later. Thank you. And then we
Hello,
have
good
another,
afternoon. Good.
yes,
My name is Dilip Kumar. I am calling from India.
mhm,
Can you hear me? Am I audible?
yes, please go
Yeah.
ahead.
In fact, I'm working for Bihar State Disaster Management Authority, Patna. There is a state in India called Bihar, and Patna is the capital. And we are working for training and capacity building, disaster management planning, climate change adaptation, then awareness generation programs in different domains. So we are also working actively in the field of climate change adaptation. So we seek your collaboration to do some programs together. Okay, like initially we can have 1 day workshop like that. So how can we go about it? Online or offline mode, whatever you suggest.
Okay, thank you very much for your suggestion. I mean, from my own organization, KCCC, we don't really have a program for the individual collaboration, but I think we can find our common interest in the collaboration. So you can send us email about the collaboration, then we will try what we can do together. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, there is another question from the chatting box. Natalia asked us, how long do you take in consultation and improve approval stage? Yes, I want to talk about this because consultation and approval stage takes a long time. I think it should take longer time than we did. Because we did it within a month, but that gave us lots of headache because a month is a very short period of time. And within a month to get the consultation and approval and everything was too hectic. So I strongly advise you to have at least 3 months to finish the process, please. And we have another question from Shiromani. Sorry about my pronunciation, but any data any data template available for the reporting adaptations? So, I mean, from my personal experience, there is no agreed standard data template for the adaptation elements. Yeah, I think so. But you can, if I'm wrong, then you can also correct me, Tipo and David. So yeah, so that's why we had to draft our own sort of template to share the information with our own stakeholders in Korea.
May I jump in?
Sure, please.
Yeah, no, I mean you are correct actually. Just to want to confirm that for example, for the reporting on GHG inventories or reporting on NDC tracking progress, there are common tabular format and common reporting format. So you have some templates for the reporting of this information, but for adaptation, there isn't one that would be common and standardized for all. The only thing that is there is the modalities, procedures, and guidelines, which I have already discussed a bit during my presentation or mentioned it. So you can find different provisions which are related to adaptation reporting, and basically this should guide the reporting or the information that you are supposed to submit as part of the BTRs. But there isn't a standardized template that you would have to use. Different countries are using different templates. Thank you.
I can also compliment here. I think the stark difference between, of course, as always, mitigation and adaptation is that adaptation is extremely context specific. There are, however, guidance materials like the Adaptation Committee provided a document that is, for example, giving some guidance on how to best report in terms of the adcoms and giving some additional information there. There is, like, for example, for national adaptation plans, there is of course the very stepwise process of creating a national adaptation plan, but this is of course like goes a step beyond reporting because it's a planning and implementation tool. But there are, like, depending on what you're looking for, there are not templates, I would say, but definitely very good guidance. So if it's not in a decision, for example, it is most likely coming, for example, when it comes from NAPS, there's also like of supplementary material from the least developed countries expert group who are specifically focusing on providing LDCs with support and capacity building. So they have these kind of also training workshops, writing workshops, writing workshops, which includes the reporting elements. And then for adaptation communication, we do have supplementary material that you can find in terms of how to or what you can include there. Of course, all of this is like not as strict, so we don't have tables, we don't have like the very like rigorous and standardized process that we have in the mitigation section, but I mean also for a very good reason. I think for the first time in the GGA now there is a common kind of North Star defined that could actually allow to measure towards something, but it's still like when you read the decision, it's still very much dependent on national circumstances and which of these kind of targets that countries want to take into account. So yeah, long story short, it's complicated, but there is material out there, and if you have any specific question for any specific information, you can drop me an email.
Okay, thank you very much. And then let me go with the question from the chatting box, and then go back to the participant with the raised hand. So the next question is from the Paula Gordon Luna. So I think she or he is asking whether there is a difference between the previous one or next year's one, the Adaptation Academy. So next year's program, we will focus on the Asia region. but there will be, as far as I understand, there will be another opportunity for the African participant to participate later next year. And then the detailed information will be shared next year. So next year's Adaptation Academy in Thailand is focusing on the Asia region. And then the main element is quite similar to the previous one, but it's a shorter course. The course is shorter. And then, yes, we have a question from the Natalia about the opinion gathering process. So yes, how is the opinion gathering process? So actually at the beginning, we wanted to gather some opinion from the specialists as well as the ministry, but actually we didn't have enough time. Because in order to submit it on time, I mean, to be input elements of the GST, we have to submit it at least within the March this year. So we didn't have get the opinion from the specialist this year. But for the opinion gathering of the ministry, we sort of provide them detailed information about what is the adaptation communication is and then what they need to do. And then we share the full text with the sheets for their feedback. And then we circulate this information by email and like official document. So we didn't have an in-person meeting, but we had the sort of email circulation process. But if you have enough time, I think it's good to have a meeting, in-person meeting, because when we share this information, we got lots of calls from the ministry that what is adaptation communication, what kinds of feedback I need to give you, because they don't have much idea about the adaptation communication. So if you have enough time, I hope that you can have an in-person meeting. And another question from Dr. Shan from Pakistan. How to integrate the research work outcome on the adaptation from academia to the reporting process? Okay, this one. In my country's case, I work for the Korea Adaptation Center for Climate Change, right? So my center is actually established by the Ministry of Environment in Korea. So we support the Ministry of Environment on the adaptation research and policy making and implementation as well. So we do everything. So it's easier for us to incorporate our research work into the policy making or reporting process. But I mean, each country has a different circumstances. So I think if you have a good research outcome, you can also talk to your Ministry of Environment. Because when we conduct the research, there was not much information available out there, so they really wanted to hear from us. So I think your country's case might be similar, so you can talk to the Ministry of Environment. Okay, we have more questions. So then, so the BOG, sorry about my poor pronunciation. Oh, so you want to be a partner with the Adaptation Academy? Then I think you can send email to Thibault, right? Okay, you already replied to it, yes. And Manuel from Zambia do you have any operating or activities in Zambia? In Korea, I mean, in my organization, no, we don't have any activities in Zambia, sorry, but I hope that in the future we can have one. Yes, to Vietnam, yes, we don't have any project, but my university colleague can also give us a add-on opinion. We don't have a specific project from my organization, but we have sort of overarching activity. So Thibault, can you also give us on
Yep.
this?
Yes, of course. And thanks all the participants for being active actually and asking a very good questions. Maybe I would complement a bit also the previous questions and the responses from Juyon on these. So, for example, how to integrate the research work outcomes. Also, just to note that, of course, the reporting process is led by the ministry, so by the government. But we encourage all the government and the ministries to collaborate with different stakeholders because it's very useful exercise. So as Gion mentioned as well, that in her organization, it's also there is a very close collaboration and the relationship when they are developing the reporting or the reports on behalf of the government, basically, and submitting under the UNFCCC. So I think it's very important, and we always encourage the ministries responsible for, or the organizations responsible for preparing the reports, to actually collaborate and reach out to other stakeholders as well. When it comes to the operations in Zambia, or I would say in Africa in general, as mentioned as well, and this is also related to the difference between next year's and the previous years of the Adaptation Academy. So as it was mentioned, last year we had this the in-person Adaptation Academy in Delft, which was basically global. So it was participants from all over the world could apply. Next year we are focusing more on regional Adaptation Academy. So as mentioned, there will be the one held for Asian region, and we are also planning one for African region. So in this context, I think it would be possible to actually apply also for from Zambia as a participants from Zambia or any other African country. And the last question I see was regarding to if it's Adaptation Academy open to all developing countries or only Asia region. So again, I think I have already responded that we are focusing next year on regions. So far, we are planning to have one for Asia and one for Africa. Hopefully, we'll be also able to organize one in other parts or other regions as well. But for now, it will be open for Africa and Asia participants. So I think I have covered most of it. Back to you.
Thank you very much. So I think we covered most of the questions. So for okay, the participant with the raised hand waited for a long time. So can I just ask Dastan first from the Kyrgyzstan, right?
Yeah. Thank you very much for valuable information, presentation. It was really nice to know those steps because Kyrgyzstan also in early stage on developing NAP and other documents as well. I wanted to highlight that I was honored to meet with Ms. Tuba Ismaili and Tibor during their last COP28 in Dubai, and then had brief discussion on what can we do together. And then that's why I wanted to reiterate once again, Tibor and Tuba Hanım, that Kyrgyzstan is ready to collaborate with you on sub-regional case, right, on Central Asia. If any activities, please let us know, and then we will do our best to collaborate with your team and with others as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And then the iPhone, the participant with the name of iPhone. I think you also the type in the chatting box. So is it same question? Okay, then I can read from the chatting box. So the participant with the name iPhone. I'm from the developing country. I'm currently carrying out the research on this. Yes, so, oh yeah, how to integrate the research work outcome and how can it be contribute to this framework? Okay. I think personally, my own, I can share my own opinion with you first, and then my colleagues can also jump in. The Korea has very unique adaptation governance system, because the Korea is one of a few countries which has an adaptation focus center like my center KCCC. When the Ministry of Environment established the KCCC, it was very early in 2009. At that time, the information about the adaptation is not much information was available out there. So they actually appointed our own organization, the Korea Environment Institute, the research institute, to host the KCCC. So now I belong to the KCCC, but also in under the umbrella of the research institute. So I think research work is very important to be in this complex framework. So I'm not sure how, but I think your research outcome will be very valuable later on. So I can. So this is my feedback response. I will maybe skim through several questions and then give floor to my colleagues from the UNFCCC. Yeah, 위에 그 슈리아. So thank you very much for your message, Shuria. So yeah, I agree with you. Thank you very much. And so Anju, there's a question from Anju. So working in domain of the climate psychology, how can I can be associated with the project in Asia or anywhere in the world? So it's another another difficult question for me. So my answer would be quite similar, but I can also invite my colleague from UNFCCC respond to it. Yeah, and Manuel's question would be quite similar. So
yeah, I can maybe.
Any other response from? Yes, please go ahead.
Yes. No, I mean just a general response probably, because there's I think we have like a lot of people from the research community here who want to be somehow involved in the respective or projects or development of the plans. I think the main thing is that these are country-driven processes. So every country decides on their own what they or how they want to approach it. So there is no one-size-fits-all solution to say, this is what we need to do in order to be part of the process. So you have heard from Jun who how Korea does it, but there are different countries who take very different roads. But I think what's common for all of them is that they all need to be based on the best available science, and especially for adaptation, it's incredibly relevant to have that in a context, in a local context, right? So that you have for example, adaptation, you have vulnerability assessments that are very specific for a reason, and that can then be used from the countries to make vulnerability assessments for NAPs or the reporting of progress or stuff like this. So it's I don't think there's a straightforward answer to all the questions, but it's a matter of this data definitely being available, and this data being researched, and then the countries to use it in their different assessments. So thanks for everyone who's doing this important work, because especially in the in the developing and least developed countries, especially the data situation and research situation often is still like very difficult for LDCs and SIDS in particular to base their plan on and reporting on. So any of this is very much appreciated, and keep up the great work.
Thank you very much. And our last two questions is that the Natalia mentioned that it's important to have the adaptation academy in Latin America and Caribbean, and also the Quasi asked us any plan to make partnership on adaptation. So Thibault, can you answer those questions?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Duyon. And yes, well, I fully agree with the comment that it would be important to have Adaptation Academy in Latin America and the Caribbean region. So we are doing our best to actually be able to organize it in that region as well. But of course, it has some steps that we have to take first. But I would encourage everyone in this call and all the participants to actually follow the UNFCCC website that I have shared as well, where all the information related to Adaptation Academy will be shared. So it would be very important to actually have a regular look at the website and check the information there. And then in addition to that, just with regards to the partnerships, I think I've mainly saw comments or questions related to, firstly, how can an institution become a partner of Adaptation Academy, or how can it be associated? And second is basically how to be involved in the Adaptation Academy as such. So to become a participant in the workshops and attend the in-person workshops or these webinars. So with regard to the partnerships, and Duyon mentioned it, I also shared my email address. So we are happy to receive any input or any interest from potential partners and discuss how the partnership could work, or the collaboration, how we can collaborate on different or in different regions and on different activities. So that's firstly. And secondly, with regards to being involved in the workshop and in Adaptation Academy as a participant to undertake the trainings. As mentioned, we are planning for now 2 regions, 2 Adaptation Academies in 2 regions. And again, please just follow the UNFCCC website, and it will be also communicated through the KAI for sure with all the participants. As mentioned, that there will be the registration process and then the application process open soon. So I believe that it would be a good thing to actually give a reminder from Duyon again about how to apply for the in-person workshop next year. So with that, thank you. I hope I clarified the questions.
Okay, so thank you very much. So I think we cover all the questions. So my colleague just share the website, just share the presentation slide. I mean, the website, you can download the presentation slide. So if you are curious about our presentation slide, you can access to the Google Drive so that you can download it. And my colleague also shared the Adaptation Academy website. So if you have any further questions or collaboration, please feel free to email us. So as I mentioned earlier, for the next year's training program, we will start the registration only next year, only January. So once the registration is open, we will circulate this registration information with you by email. So please check your mailbox. So just last thing, before we all leave, can we turn on the camera so that we can have a group photo together? Okay, thank you very much. Wow, wonderful
Thank
to
you.
have all of your faces. Wonderful to see you all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So thank you very much for your sincere participation. We are really happy to see you all. So have a wonderful remaining day and happy holidays and Merry Christmas. Bye bye everyone. Bye.